Running a brokerage is hard work, so whether you're focused on building your own sales pipeline, hiring the best agents, leveling up your team's production, or protecting the culture you've built, you're in the right place. Real estate brings the challenges, and we share the solution. Welcome to the show dedicated to broker entrepreneurs. Welcome to the Brokerpreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Brokerpreneur Podcast. I'm Dr. Ben Spears, the Doctor of Flow. I'm here as usual with this guy, if you're watching YouTube, Matt Vi, the big guy. Matt, how you doing?
The big guy. That rhymes. Did I never notice that rhyme before?
No, you've said that before in the podcast. I'm sure I know it because I was listening to it the other day, and I'm like, you know that rhymes?
That's right.
How you doing?
You know how I'm doing. I'm doing fantastic. We got so much going on, and we're talking. And I always love doing podcasts and bringing great guests on.
Yeah.
But this has got to be one of my favorite ones, and here's the reason why.
Okay.
We're talking about cash flow. We're going to get into cash flow, and there ain't no better conversation for a brokerage than cash flow.
Right? Yeah. If that doesn't perk everybody's ears up, I don't know. Why I wouldn't. But that on top of that, I gotta say. This is another Scott Mason referral.
It is, Scott's just
and awesome. So he's always bringing the heat with not only his episodes with us, but with his guests. Let's go ahead and bring on David Safir. He is the founder and CEO of Cash's Clear Learning Systems. How you doing, David?
I am thrilled to be here, and I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, Dr. Ben.
I absolutely love that, and so Cash is clear.
Cash is king is what cash is.
Cash is clear. I love, cash is so many things.
That's right.
And I want to know really quick.
Joe versus the volcano. I got to jump in for just a second. Joe versus the volcano, right? And Joe versus the volcano, there's an opium dealer, right? That says time is money. Money is time. Opium is money. And Tom Hanks says, okay, so what is time again? and I love that part because, of course, everybody gets confused when they talk about cash.
Yes.
How it gets mixed up into everything else. It gets mixed up into time and revenue and costs and expenses and gets thrown into this big old bucket, and everybody gets confused on it, just like the guy did in the movie. So I'm glad that David is here because he's going to help us sort through all of that.
He's going to bring the clarity.
About opium.
He's going to bring the clarity.
That's right.
So, David, why don't you tell us a little bit about Cash's Clear Learning Systems? I know you have the cash management project, so I want to touch on that as well. But tell us a little bit about how this all got started. Did you start doing this last week?
Oh, no, I didn't start doing this last week. My first exposure to cash flow and managing your business by managing your cash flow was actually when I was in college. I was working for my father, and he had a firm that in today's dollar numbers would be about a $25 million in revenue manufacturing company. So it wasn't small, but they were in trouble. And this is back in the days where it was one-page spreadsheets, not these multi-page.
Right.
And it was and they had a daily spreadsheet of how much revenue was going to come in that they expected and what were the bills that they're going to pay. And every single day, he and the controller, he was the president, he had a controller. That was my first exposure. When I was in college, I figured everybody knew about this stuff and everybody would understand cash flow. But lo and behold, fast forward, I did general consulting, and I said, I really want to focus. And I stood back and I realized everybody that I was consulting for had the same issue. They were having cash flow issues. Yeah. Now, they might have called it revenue. They might have called it, they needed better marketing. They might have called it expenses. But all these things put together are directly impact cash flow. And great, let's talk about the cash management project. But why is this called Cash is Clear? It's because I realized that when people, business owners are working with accountants, and I'm not an accountant, I'm a businessman. But when they're working with accountants, they're usually handed GAAP basis financial reports. Do you guys know what GAAP is? You might if you took an accounting class. It's General Accepted Accounting Principles. I happen to know what it is. Most business owners don't. Not only that, they don't know how to read accounting reports. But in addition, accounting reports are backward looking.
Right.
They can tell you what you did last month, last quarter, last year, but they have no capability in and of themselves for saying, this is what's going to happen in the future. And so there's clarity on when you're working with cash flow, on the reporting, you know exactly what happened in the past, but it's projecting the future and then saying, we like that future, we can enhance it, or we don't like the future, let's fix it before it bites us in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. So, and that's such a great point. We were actually on a mastermind today, and cash flow came up, right? And so we were talking. It was a bunch of brokers, and we were on Not So Secret Society.
Yep.
And a couple of the brokers said, hey, this is what's going on, and we're moving in towards the end of the year, and all that, and all that kind of stuff. And so naturally cash flow came up because with some businesses, especially real estate, it can be cyclical, right? And as it goes through those cycles, if you're not planning the right way, then cash flow becomes an issue. And they were talking about whether they needed to sell more real estate and how they had to leverage it, where they could cut costs, all that kind of stuff. So we dove into that. And so I wanted to bring something up really quick about your background, right? Because Ben always loves Dr. Ben loves to know about everybody's background. So you have an MBA in international business, is that correct?
Correct.
And you worked at some companies, international companies, correct?
I did. I worked at very large companies. When I joined Kodak, it was a Fortune 20 company.
Wow.
I mean, it was huge. And then it shrank, but I was there and another publicly held company, and I was responsible for the profit and loss for those companies. I never worried about cash flow.
Right.
I worried about receivables because I was working within a division and I was measured on a profit and loss. And eventually, if you didn't bring your cash in, then you would, you take a hit to your revenue, drop to the bottom line. But that's my background. And I learned how to pull all sorts of levers to increase profit, right? Yes, reducing expenses and increasing sales. But lo and behold, two things happen. Do you mind if I ramble a little bit?
No, come on, bring it.
Explain this. So when you're increasing revenue as a small business owner, oftentimes the revenue doesn't come in. You might book it as revenue today because your accountant says these are the rules for GAAP-based accounting. You sign a contract today, it is sold. I don't care when you get your cash in. And so mentally you're going, oh, gee, I made a sale. Great. But let's face it, guys, until the cash comes in, the sale's not really made. But yet your reports are telling you that they are. Okay. But in addition to that, oftentimes before your cash comes in, you have expenses like what? Salaries, rent, etc. So if you're growing, you're actually oftentimes spending a lot more money before any revenue comes in.
Yep.
So as far as I'm concerned, it's not a great strategy for everybody or to grow. I mean, it's craziness, but from a cash flow perspective, you've got to understand what's going to happen if you grow. And then the same thing on the expense side, most of the expenses that you have, unless you're not a smart person, and I expect that most of the people here are smart, they're necessary. You're not going out there and say, hey, I think I want to have pink petunias delivered to my office every day.
Right.
You're buying software. That was the last episode of yours I listened to, was a buying consortium that helped you reduce the cost of your software. But it's not like you can eliminate it. So where the real expenses are bad clients and bad products. Now in real estate, bad clients are the ones that cost you 5 times more time than your good clients. And bad products, I don't know, with real estate is a piece of property that you realize you should have never picked up. It's not saleable for the price the owner wants, and it's a waste of everybody's time because it's never going to sell at that price, right? So those are the huge costs usually in a business, is bad clients, bad products.
Yeah, so that is that's an absolutely fantastic point. Let me speak really directly broker language here, right? Here's what here's what you're really talking about. So, those bad clients are the agents that you bring in, I've heard a lot lately about, people saying, the main determinant of how successful you are in real estate as a brokerage is your agent count. Man, that is absolutely incorrect, right? Because you can have what you were just saying. You can have bad clients, right? You can have agents that come in, they're using resources, okay? The resource of time, the resource of getting set up and onboarding and all that kind of stuff. They're using all those resources, but they're not producing, right? So that's
Right.
and then bad product. I think a clear sign of bad product would be you have agents that are not trained, and so they're out there writing contracts or taking listings or taking leads or doing all of these other things that they do, and for whatever reason, those things are not converting to a sale. And because they're not converting to a sale, the broker now has some mix of agents that are quote unquote bad clients, and then some mix of bad products, which is actually agents that are doing things that are costing you money instead of generating that revenue. I love that you brought that up. That's absolutely a fantastic point, David.
Thanks for the translation. That makes perfect sense. That is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, kill it.
Yeah. So Matt knows how I roll, right? When I'm listening to anybody talk, I'm always thinking about the audience, right? I'm not the cash flow expert. That's not where I need to be. I'm not the real estate guru. That's not where I need to live, right? I can talk about the central nervous system, but that's not what people listen for. On top of that, I want to say, okay, I'm a broker. I'm listening. Maybe I just started my brokerage, right? Give me a little definition of what cash flow is.
That's a great question. So I actually coached one of the accountants I'm training to help set up a cash flow system for a broker. And what cash flow is, it's very, very simple definition of cash flow is how much money was in the bank at the beginning of one period and how much was in the bank at the end of a period, whether it's a week, a month, or year. The difference is your cash flow. So if at the beginning of the week you had $1,000, at the end of the week you had 1,500, you had a positive cash flow of 500. If you had $750 at the end of the week, you had negative cash flow of $250. That's the simplistic way of thinking about
Love it.
cash flow.
Love it.
It's just how much goes up or down, and it's very, very much dependent on when. So that's one of the big things: is when does something happen, not just did it happen or not.
Right.
Because because you could be expecting a $5,000 commission on Friday, and you had you dropped to 750. Well, then you would have had a big jump in cash flow at the end of the week, but it got pushed over till Monday or the following Friday. And so what the big issue with cash flow is, it's all about timing.
Yeah.
Because you could have it all coming in. You can go bankrupt waiting for the $1 million.
That's right.
And if you go bankrupt, the $1 million goes to your creditors. Now you can probably borrow from the bank, but that's a strategy. That's once you figure out your cash flow, then you figure out what are the strategies or the management systems to be able to work around shortfalls.
Yeah, that's so killer. And and that kind of halfway answers a question I was about to ask, right? What is so if somebody's deciding to measure their cash flow, should they measure it weekly? Should they measure it monthly, bi-weekly, every 6 months, every quarter? I'm sure it's going to be, my guess would be there's different reasons to do it at different times. So can you talk to us a little bit about, the basically the term of when you would pay attention to it and why you would want to measure that way?
I'd be glad to. So for those listeners out there, the 1% or 10% that are flush with cash, that you really don't have a cash issue, or you've got credit lines that are never getting close to being used, and you're pretty good with managing it, looking at it once a month is fine. For everybody else, I recommend weekly, unless you're in real trouble, then you really might need to look at it daily. And I've worked with clients that for a while, we look at it every single day until things calm down. That's when you're scraping the bottom of your bank accounts,
Yep.
your credit lines, etc. But weekly, why do you do it weekly? There's one other group of people who can look at it once a month. The people who get paid once a month and who pay their bills once a month.
Right.
I have yet to find anybody. Actually, actually, I know of a trucking company, on another accountant who I work with and coach him. The trucking company gets paid once a month. So, okay, you group all your bills in really tight, but
Right.
still, you've got expenses throughout the month.
Mhm.
And so that's why weekly, because that's how you get paid and that's how you spend your money, makes so much sense. And to set it up, 13 weeks is a standard for the industry. And it's not so much how much is going in and out. The name of the game is bank balance. What will your bank balance be in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in 10 weeks? That's what you're looking at. And it's obviously a measure what's coming in and out, but that's what you're trying to do is stay above zero. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I'm loving this conversation already. And so if I look at this from a real estate brokerage standpoint, so I'm going to direct a question right back to you, David, and I'm going to ask Matt. You made a great point, right? Like, this one company and they get paid once a month. Well, a lot of companies, maybe let's say companies who have a subscription model, maybe it's a little bit easier for them to forecast and say, okay, I know this person's payment's going to run on this month and then next month and same thing. Start forecasting those things. From a real estate brokerage standpoint, and you don't know that. Maybe you have a brokerage where it's just agents pay me, on this day of the month, every single month, and it's a subscription model, right? So that could be the case. For those brokers, whether they're in like, hey, a really good financial place, or maybe they're just starting their brokerage and they're trying to figure this out, right now. How do you look at that, and how do you forecast if you're like, man, I don't know if anything's going to close in the next 3 months, and that kind of thing. How does a person what's the starting point?
I'm glad you asked this, because we actually spent a whole hour. I run a mastermind twice a week, and helping that one accountant set it up. We spent an hour talking about this.
Hey, Dr. Ben here. I hope you're enjoying this episode. If sometimes you feel overloaded or alone when it comes to building your brokerage, I want you to know that we are here for you. There's so much support available to agents, but hardly any dedicated to brokers. I want to personally invite you to schedule a complimentary strategy call where Matt will help you build a 3-step profitability plan that will immediately produce results. This is not a sales pitch. There's no obligation. Simply click the link in the description below. Now let's get back to the show.
And so brokerages have two types of forecasting they're doing. One is short term and the other is long term. Now let's talk about the short term, which is deals under contract, right? You actually have a distinct advantage because you're working with contracts that are expected to close. And so as soon as you know that something is going to close, whether it's in a week or 2 weeks or 2 months, you put it on there as a fairly fixed date, unless obviously contracts change, they get canceled, but you know about those. And so as these things move in, you should get more and more confidence of your 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week cash flow. The cash is coming in, and it might vary by state, whether you get paid the day it closes, a day later, a week later, but you can figure that all in. Right? So that's fairly easy to do. What's harder to do is, okay, what's happening in 2 months? Most of our contracts are a month out, but what's going to happen? How many contracts are we going to get under our belt this week? And when are they going to sell? So that's the harder part. And this is where you start using history. And you take a look over time. Now, you mentioned that it's cyclical. So this adds another level of complexity. But you look over time and you say, well, how many contracts did we get under our belt last year? And what percent each month or each quarter? So you can get a rough indication of where you are today. Well, was next quarter up traditionally over time? If so, then we're going to project out a little bit up. And quite frankly, I spread things like peanut butter. If you don't know, you just spread it out and say, we think we're going to get $100,000 in revenue over that 3-month period. And I only go out 3 months. If you need to go further, then that's fine. We just say, and divide it up. We'll do $130,000 over the quarter. That's 10,000 a week. Why? Because you get closer in, you'll be able to clump it into closings, and you'll
Right.
be able to get more and more accurate. And it doesn't really matter 3 months out if it's all in 1 week or spread out. So, I mean, this is a nutshell, and it's going to be dependent
Yeah,
on
Of
every
course, of
single
course.
brokerage. But those are the two ways you forecast as a broker.
Yeah, so I love it. That's extremely helpful. So let's talk about because I love playing. I love drawing that out. I love playing it out and saying, here's what we're going to do from a cash flow situation. But cash flow is dramatically impacted by expenses, right? So how do those two things? How do those two things correlate? You're helping people plan their cash flow. But at the same time, how active are you? Are you looking weekly at your expenses? Are you looking weekly at your, so tell us a little bit about what you're paying attention to, what you're looking at. When do you make adjustments on your expenses and stuff like that? Talk to us a little bit about it. Talk to us a little bit about that if you don't mind.
That'd be great. So yes, you are looking at both weekly. When you're looking at cash flow weekly, it's the combination of revenue versus expenses. I just put up on my YouTube channel a video. I'm publishing all 209 of my strategies onto YouTube. And my first one that I came out was strategy number 99, pay late. Now,
Love it.
I'm not talking about small business owners you pay late. I'm talking about the big bills that for big companies like your telephone, etc. You can decide today that I'm not going to pay my telephone bill on time this month because we're having a shortfall, a temporary cash shortfall. So you can move bills out fairly easily. Utilities, certain ones you can't rent. Man, those are like 5-day grace periods. You got to be, and with big penalties.
Right.
But anyhow, if you want more information, go look at my YouTube channel, watch the video. But that can be done really short term of whether they're going to move things in and out. And this is why you need 13 weeks so you can start seeing some visibility. When are we looking at a problem? Are we looking at it in 2 months? It could resolve itself, but let's start working on it today. Are we looking at it 2 weeks? You need to take action today, probably. But that's why you're looking at over time in the future, not just managing by bank account, which is what's our bank account today? What are our bills that we got to pay this week? What money are we getting in?
Yeah.
That's where, unfortunately, a lot of businesses are.
I love that. And that's such a great strategy. And I hope that you're going to give us the YouTube channel information whenever Dr. Ben asks about all that, because we want to make sure that we put it in the link so that everybody can go check that out, because that's absolutely a super smart strategy, right? Understand what you're basically talking about is understand your business. Really know your business. It's not just about, okay, I'm a real estate broker, and so I have to know real estate agents and I have to train people on real estate. That's not all that you're doing here. You're a business owner, man. Know what your expenses are and which ones you can stretch it out with, right? Which ones you can't stretch it out with. Know which ones that in a year and a half from now you need to completely step away from. Do you need the space that you need? All of that goes into that planning part of what you're doing. And if you understand your cash flow and what's impacting it, I would think it just makes it so much easier to make better decisions as you start to plan all of that out and you start taking your 13-week, groups of planning and start applying that to your big picture. I would just think that would help tremendously, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it will. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the way that oh, go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
No,
No,
you're
there's
the
a
guest.
couple of comments. So real estate brokers, they're busy people. If you're getting to the level of success, you could be outsourcing your bookkeeping unless you know what you're doing. And your bookkeeper can help you figure out what the terms and conditions are of these bills. And they should be able to tell you, hey, listen, this bill's been paid on time, so we can push it out a month, or we can push it out. I mean, telephone bills, it's like 2 months before they start threatening you. I'm not suggesting anybody does this in a vacuum. You've got to go figure it out for yourself. But work with your bookkeeper or an accountant. And that was number one. And the other one is a very interesting thing you said, do you need all this space? Well, Most of the time there's a traditional thought pattern, which is, okay, we move out of the space. The other one would be sublease it,
Mhm.
right? Usually there's multiple strategies because there's a
Absolutely.
huge expense of moving. But subleasing, especially in today's society where people need temporary office space, et cetera, can be a really great strategy.
Renegotiate, right? Commercials
Renego- Oh
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
there's a lot that you can do. And when you start paying attention to this stuff, you can take a close look at it and say, is this really what I need to do? I'm looking at my cash flow. Man, this is where the big hits are on my cash flow. Is there two of those out of the five that I could make an adjustment on that changes the game for me cash flow wise, right?
Right.
So unless you're paying attention though, you can't figure that out.
Correct. Yep. And as soon as you start mapping it out, you start getting clues.
Yeah.
And you see it laid out in front of you and say, wait a minute, every 2 weeks I'm negative. What's going on here?
Mhm.
Or every third week of the month, I'm negative. What's going on here? You start seeing patterns and you can make the fundamental changes so you can just set it and forget it, change the billing date on some of these things, and all of a sudden it just flattens it out.
Yep.
Yeah, and and Matt knows I'm a huge fan of the words "map it out" to a fault. It's the same thing. So if I bring some of my past experience and expertise to this, it's the same thing. We're just diagnosing something,
Right.
and so if I'm if a patient came to me and they said, "Well, hey, I have headaches on a regular basis." Well, I can easily just say, well, okay, lay down. Let's just like take a look at your neck or take a look at the musculature around around your head, because that's where you feel it. It's a completely different thing to say, listen, let's take a step back. Let's take some x-rays. Let's get some measurements of your leg lengths and take a look at all these different aspects to really diagnose why is there a problem that you're feeling here? Because it's all connected. And that's one of the beautiful things about financials. That's one of the beautiful things about numbers. It's one of the beautiful things about the human body is it all works together as long as you look at it holistically, exactly, as a whole. And so I'll touch on. I'll ask you this question, and then I'm going to ask you, how to get in touch with you. So I'll give you the answers to the test. How would you say if someone's just having an issue, right? We're talking, very definitive about things. Someone's looking and they're saying, gosh, I'm having an issue with my business, right? They got their head in their hands. Man, how do they go about diagnosing from a financial standpoint? Man, where can I find this answer?
It's a good question because one of my most popular articles is the title is Keep Digging. Your cash flow problems aren't what you think they are.
Love that.
And so you use the headache example. That's a symptom. It's not the root cause.
Yes.
And so people will look at the symptoms. I can't make payroll, and they assume it's because they don't have enough revenue, and they make assumptions of why they're having problems. So that doesn't really answer your question, but
Right.
it does tell you get a lot of false positives when you're looking around for answers. And the only real way to dig out and figure out what's happening that I know of is by working with somebody who knows what they're doing. Sorry, there's no magic pill for this.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Now you might be able to just go out. Well, no, so I'll give you some steps though. Number one, change your mindset. And this is the Cash is Clear framework that I've put together.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to have a better mindset about forget about what you think cash flow is. You've got to be learning about what it is. That's number one. Then you need good bookkeeping. If you don't have good bookkeeping, there's no discussion. Just turn this off and go get yourself a good bookkeeper, then come back and listen to the rest of the story.
Right.
Sorry, but that's just how it is. So step number two is to do a mapping, which is what we talked about of creating a cash flow spreadsheet. Number three is start learning how to manage your cash flow, which is what we just talked about, these baby steps of just moving things around. It's basically changing when things come in, changing when things go out. That's managing. But then you need to understand how either to be mentored or to mentor other people because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not the finance department, it's sales, operations, marketing, and you need to analyze till finally you can maximize your cash flow by implementing the really good strategies that are fundamental, like firing your loser clients and dropping your loser products, right? And I mean, that's not a bad place to start. Since we brought it up, just take a step back and ask yourself that you know, do I have what Matt described, not brokers, but agents who are really draining me? And do I have products on my listings that are draining us? But there's your framework to
Absolutely.
get started.
And so such a huge point, right? Because there's people that'll start things like marketing programs, and they'll spend a tremendous amount of money on marketing programs, and they'll say, well, I've got the cash flow, or I've got the money set aside, and I have to market, and they'll start writing those checks, and they'll quit looking at the ROI. They'll quit looking at the things that impact that. And then later they're going, okay, how come I don't have the money? And the reason why is because the result they were supposed to get from something they didn't get, but they were too busy looking at other things to realize that they didn't get it. And that actually goes to a point that you made, and we talk about this all the time, okay? And so it has everything to do with what you're talking about with finances, has everything to do with recruiting. It doesn't matter if you believe you know what you're doing. It matters what you're executing on. You can't wing it with this. You can't wing it with the bookkeeper. You can't wing it with your recruiting. You can't wing it with your training. You can't wing it on your culture. All of these things, you have to have a plan for them. You have to be focused on what it is you're trying to accomplish with them, and you have to constantly revisit that plan. I think everybody would agree with that, but does it get done? If it's not getting done, then that is why you're not getting the result that you want, is because you're not revisiting it at the time frames that you need to in order to get the result that you want. So, David, I think what we're talking about here is don't wing it with your finances and don't wing it with your recruiting, right?
Right. Absolutely. Recruiting, the expense of a bad recruit is huge. It directly impacts cash flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the HR department, part of the cash flow team that has to be organized, every part of the business.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned a second ago, you said, I'll give you a few things that you can start with, but really you need to connect with someone who can really help you through this. And I'm going to ask you right now, how do people get in touch with you? Because I'm assuming if they get in touch with you, you'll be able to connect them with somebody who knows how to do this.
Well, yes, depending on their profile, we might be a good fit. I still, even though I do training for accountants and bookkeepers, I still work with a few clients.
Okay.
But I also have people that I've trained around the country that I can say, go work with them. They're closer to you, well, I've got outside the country as well. You guys probably have mostly a US following, but Canada. I've got a really great guy up in Canada that they can work with, because Canadian laws are different than US laws.
For sure.
So get a hold of me at david@davidthefear.com, and cashesclear.com is my website, and you can schedule some time with me. There you can also download a free 10 habits that anybody can implement to start improving their cash flow. And that's an ebook if you want it. Social media wise, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only place I am. So I'd love to connect on LinkedIn as well.
For sure. And we highly recommend it, guys. We've had conversations even before this. David knows exactly what he's talking about if you haven't figured that out. So we hope that you reach out and you connect with him. And other than that, Matt, any more questions before I thank David and put a little bow on it?
I love the topic. I want to thank Scott for getting us Scott Mason for getting us connected. I appreciate you bringing the heat today and sharing all this. Right, it's a great time of the year for everybody to grab onto this and leverage it. So we can't thank you so much. We're super grateful.
You're very welcome, Dr. Ben and Matt. It's been a pleasure. Really exciting conversation. It's always fun to worked up a little bit about a topic. It's great.
You can tell you're passionate about it, and we love that.
Yep.
Well, everyone, wherever you listen to this, whether it be iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, any of those platforms, make sure you hit that follow button. If you're watching this on YouTube, what's up? Make sure you hit that red subscribe button, that bell right beside it to get notified every time we drop a new episode. There's no better time than the present than go to brokerpreneurpodcast.com. Check out all the cool things we have there to help you grow your brokerage, no matter what phase or stage of the business that you're in. We have so many free links in the description below. Make sure as you're scanning down, you go to David's first, and then after that, take a look at ours and grab some of those free things that we had to help you grow your brokerage. Matt, we bring on amazing guests just like David for one reason alone. Tell them what that is.
Man, we just want to be part of your win. Thanks, everybody.